I will transition over to the InfoEd site. I am already logged in for the sake of efficiency today, and we'll give you a little bit of an overview of some things that have changed a little bit, maybe since the last time you saw the portal, if you've been in it before in one of our other trainings. But this is the general landing page.
Stacy, you're not sharing yet.
Yeah, I didn't
not
think
sharing
so.
yet.
When I stop one thing, I forget to hit the share again for the next thing. I think I need this one. Yeah, so hopefully now you're seeing the portal page.
All is well, yes.
Yes, very good. Oh, excuse me. So you will use your UTAG credentials to log into this page, but once you're in, this is what you will see. And I'll point out that I am logged in here as a demo PI. This is a profile we've created specifically for demonstrating the site and giving you an overview of what things look like. You'll notice as demo PI, which is a replica of a regular traditional investigator who might be interacting with InfoEd, you will see that you have a blue menu bar across the top, a left menu list on the side. Proposals and spin will be the only things you see right there as an investigator. And then these tabs across the top are also standard for everyone to access records and various things like that. One thing that we have changed since we started doing these trainings is we have added this white box here. These white boxes are called widgets. And this particular widget is going to have some specific information in it. First of all, it's going to have whatever our next training is that is coming up, so you can see that easily at a glance. And then it's going to have a referral to our InfoEd general mailbox, which you are always welcome to use to reach out with problems, questions, or suggestions. And this little message here just reminds us that we're in the test environment, so we don't get confused which environment we're working in as administrators. I will point out that these three widgets, the system messages, the conflict of interest disclosure, and the COI who logs in is going to see on their screen. There are some adjustments that you can make to your widget screen in this button down here called Portal Configurations. This will allow you to add available widgets and take available widgets off your screen, as well as to change columns. For example, if I want my widgets all in one column, I can list them there. If I want my system messages at the bottom because I don't really want to pay attention to that for whatever reason, I can move it to the bottom of the list, and then you'll see that the screen rearranges itself to follow the instructions that you gave it. So you have some control over what you display on this screen and the order in which you display things, but these three widgets will always be present. You can move them around on the screen, but you can't get rid of them. So that's a little bit of an overview. Jamie, I think you're going to talk a little bit more about records, locating records. So do you want to do that part, or do you want me to cover that here?
No, I can take over at this point. That's fine.
Okay, so I'm going to pass the baton back to Jamie for more of the technical demonstration at this point, and she will pick up where I am leaving off.
All right, so I am also logged in as demo PI. So I pulled up this exact same screen so you can see the reorganization that Stacy just did. And what we wanted to point out, especially on this screen, because now we're starting to get into the proposal side of things, is these two features right here. So there's actually 3 or 4 different ways to locate records in InfoEd, but 3 of them happen on this bar up top here. So number 1 is locate my records. And when I click locate my records, all I'm getting is all the records on which I am what they call the record owner. And in the context of proposal, that means PI. So this is all the records on which I am the PI. So my is a very, people think, oh, well, of course that's my record too, but it's not. It really belongs only to the PI, and therefore this is the PI's shortcut for getting to those records. If you click on locate records, then you get some criteria. So you can say, I want to look at all the proposals, and you can use these additional fields to search by. So if I wanted to say, oh, I want to search by record number, or I want to search by record owner, or I want to search by title, any of those things, I can search by those, and then I can narrow my list down. So someone who's in a department administrative position, or our other grants coordinator who's on the call, these will be the kinds of things that you guys would do in order to find records on which you are not the PI. So you can't use locate my, you use locate when you're just looking for records to which you have access, and then using criteria to find those. The other kind of nice quick feature here is this little quick find. So if you happen to know an attribute of this proposal that you are looking for, so for example, if I happen to know that I'm looking for something by demo PI, I can type demo in here and it's going to find everything on which I am the PI. It also searches for record numbers. So if I happen to know I was looking for 6000323 or 6000312, I can just type those in here and it will just find that single record. Oh, and I lied. It's not finding it for me. I'll have to figure that out. So locate my records, locate records, quick find. Quick find searches the number, the PI, and the title field. So any set of characters you put in here, it'll search all three of those fields for that set of characters. So just, to keep my, yeah, there it is. I must have just typed it wrong the first time. So I just typed in 6000312. I probably put an extra 0 in there. And so I hit enter, and then it comes up with that exact number. So if you happen to know the number, you can use quick find. If you happen to know the PI or name or part of the title, you can use quick find to your advantage here. It's much faster than trying to hit locate records and search by title and blah, blah, blah. So those are all the features for finding existing records, but that's not really what we're here to do today. Today, we are here to create a new proposal. So I'm going to go ahead and go into proposals, and I'm going to say create new proposal. So you'll notice that InfoEd likes to stack windows. So I tend to like to kind of stagger them so that I can see that there's windows behind. But note, if you click off of this and this one seems to disappear, it's just because it's hidden behind. So pay attention to how many windows you have open at any given time. And I just kind of like to stagger them here so that you can kind of see the whole screen, but still know that there's multiple windows going on. So I'll make this kind of adjust the size to my liking, and then we'll go through this. So you get the create new proposal screen. There are 8 fields here, I believe, that we have to fill in order to create a record. So the first one is the PI name, and by default, because I am logged in, it puts my name in the PI field. So if I am not going to be the PI, this is the opportunity to change it. It can also be changed later. So if you forget or whatever, it's not a big deal. It can be changed later. It's just a convenience for the time being. You could start out right with just changing the PI. The other thing that it does by default is say this is going to be a new proposal. So we can leave that as new. You have the opportunity to copy from existing proposals. So if you want to use a previous proposal as a template for your new proposal, you can do that. But today we're just going to start from scratch. So we're going to leave that as create new. The other choice here you have is a proposal type. And so you can see we have new and renewal and continuation, resubmission, revision. All of those are types of proposals that you could have. But in this case, again, we're focusing on today a new proposal. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that as new. And then when we get down here, we have 3 different sources for funding opportunities. The source number 1 is we can search this grants.gov. So this is for mostly federal opportunities, I think all federal opportunities. And you can use the search criteria to look for different search terms. I'm actually not entirely certain which fields this searches when I type something like education in here, but it comes up with all the opportunities on grants.gov. And when you click select, it brings that information in. So you get an opportunity schema, basically, that InfoEd can read and can say exactly what is necessary for that particular proposal. So the other thing you can do is search from SPIN. So I can do the same kind of search through SPIN. And the other thing I can do is set up a proposal manually. And that's what we're going to do today. So my example today is a foundation called the Russell Sage Foundation. And so when I set up the proposal manually, because there isn't a grants.gov or a SPIN record for this, I just say, okay, I have to set this up manually. I'm going to search for the sponsor name. So I'm just going to start typing Russell. So if I type RU, all it takes is 2 letters, and then it starts filtering the list of all the sponsors that we have in InfoEd already. So I get it right off the bat. I could also have started with SA, and it would have found Sage. And if I just keep typing, it limits the list as I keep typing. So it is a contains search. So if you just know part of the sponsor name, that's all you're going to need. And it filters it down as you keep typing. So I'm going to go ahead and click this to select it. You do have to select it from the list. You can't just keep typing. It does have to be the choice from the list. And if for some reason you cannot find the list, or find the entity that you're looking for in the list, please go ahead and just shoot an email over to infoed@utoledo.edu. We're going to have a process for selecting an entity, or for requesting a new sponsor at some future point. But for the time being, you can send those requests to us or to your grants coordinator, however you would like to do that. And there is a TBD to put in here to as a placeholder for a future sponsor. But I'm going to use Russell Sage Foundation today. And then I am going to do I'm just going to give this a title. So the title here is going to be the title of your proposal, but you don't have to have it like fully complete right at this moment. You can in fact change it later. So again, I'm just going to put in example for 10-12-2023. And I can update that later with a real title if I want to. You just want something that's going to be identifiable, because if everybody just put TBD, that's going to get kind of annoying. It won't help you figure out which of the multiple TBDs is yours. So I'm going to go ahead and select a start date. You can start from the calendar. So those were all just things I typed in because the browser remembers those last dates that you typed into that field. So I can start from the calendar. Note that the calendar does begin on a Monday, which is a little bit unusual, but it is how InfoEd works. And then I can use the month here to say I'm going to start next year in February. And then I can also, instead of clicking through all of that in the calendar, because I'd have to click out a bunch of years, I can also just type in here. So I'm going to say this is going to end on 01/31/2026. So this will be a 2-year project. And as soon as I click off of this, it's going to actually change that number of project periods from 1 to 2. So it does the math for you to figure out how many project periods you need for this particular proposal. You can adjust it if necessary. But for the time being, it's just going to do a nice round number for you. So this is a 2-year project. It's got 2 project periods. I filled in all of these fields, and this is what is necessary to just create a record. So because we mentioned that this is very collaborative, this action of clicking the create proposal button actually puts something in InfoEd for everybody to look at. So this is going to take a second here. It does a little bit of spinning. And if this was a grants.gov opportunity or a SPIN opportunity, it would be downloading the schema and figuring out what screens it needs to show you and what forms need to be filled out. But because this is just a manual one, it's going to use our default template, is what we call it. And on our default template, the first thing you see is the setup questions. So I'm going to get through this screen and then I'm going to pause for questions. So on our setup questions screen here, we have what we would normally see in the default. So depending on what schema what opportunity you choose, and therefore what schema it's using, you may have different questions than this on this page. These are questions that are generated by InfoEd. We don't have a lot of control over them, but we will make this as easy as we possibly can. And there will be a link to some instructions here shortly. We're going to add like an explainer for what are all these questions and what do they mean. So I'm just going to kind of quickly run through these because I need to do that in order to get to the next one. So I'm going to say there's no specific reference, but this is not an unsolicited application. There is a deadline, and I'm going to say it's going to be an electronic portal because I happen to know that Russell Sage uses their own special portal for these kinds of applications. So I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to say the application is due in January. So I'm going to say it's going to yell at me, 01/01/2024. And then a deadline time, I can just type in 5:00 p.m. and then I can select my my time zone. So we'll just do Eastern Standard. There we go. So all that information, I should know that from the opportunity itself, but you do have to reproduce it because it's not coming in from grants.gov or from SPIN, which would have that sort of filled in for you already. Then I can answer these really quick questions here. Is my proposal going to involve human subjects? No, it's not. Is it going to involve laboratory animals? No, it's not. Is it going to involve multiple principal investigators? No, it's not. And is this a training grant? It's not. So I'm going to answer all those no easily. And then this question down here is about what is the rate that this proposal should be, what F&A rate should it be gathering, or what should it be, it should apply to it. So I'm going to say that this particular demo PI works on main campus, and this is research. So it's going to be main campus organized research. So that's the one I'm going to select. And then on campus. So do note too that this is the rate that would apply for most things. However, Russell Sage is one of those foundations that does not actually allow F&A to be budgeted. We're not allowed. So I will be showing you later when we get to the budget tool how to remove the F&A so that it's counted as under recovery. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Continue. And when I do that, it is going to tick off this page. It's going to say this page is done, and it's going to bring me up all these other pages for me to fill out, these screens to fill out. So I'm going to take a little breather here for a second. And if there are any questions that I can address right now, we'll pause.
Waylon does have a question. If the PI enters the incorrect due date, can it be changed? Where might that happen?
Yes, absolutely. So the setup questions right here can be uncompleted and fixed. So as soon as I uncomplete that, then these all become editable again. So, and that can be edited by either the grants coordinator or the PI or another researcher, the department admin, anybody who has access to this record and edit access to this record would be able to change those.
Can you point out that completed box? Yeah, that little box it's kind of small and it's in the upper right corner, but it's also got some kinds of superpowers. So we just want to make sure you're aware of it.
Yeah, and it's tricky. The setup questions, when I clicked Save and Continue, there was a button down there. It did it for me automatically, but on other pages, you'll have to do that. You'll have to say intentionally, I am done with this now. So that's where you would fix the deadline date if it was entered incorrectly. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to move on to the intake endorsement form. So right after setup questions, we have this intake/endorsement form. And this is going to be our replacement for both the intake form and the RSP 100 form. So that's why we have this little note up top here that's kind of helping you understand that we're consolidating those two things. And we do have some instructions up here. And basically the instructions tell you, fill out these two sections first because they're going to help your grants coordinator align the appropriate resources to help you with proposal success. So go ahead and fill these out first, but don't finish the form until you finished your budget and personnel tab. That's the short answer for what do all these instructions mean, because you don't want to really get into your shared credit or your budget F&A stuff until both of these other screens are completed. These grids that you see here are views of the information that are on these other two screens. So don't do anything beyond filling out these, but filling these out right here will really help your grants coordinator align the right resources for you and engage them and get them engaged more early than we would normally have been able to. So I'm not going to go through all these questions right now. If we have time, I can come back to them later. But suffice to say, fill out the resource engagement and research attributes first. And then I'm going to move down to budget. So the budget, again, opens in its own little window. So it is a special tool. It is its own screen, its own window. And so now I have effectively 3 screens stacked on top of each other. And what it does is, this is the replacement for the Excel spreadsheet. So it does not work the same way as the Excel spreadsheet. There's not a lot that is common across those, unfortunately. So this is going to be a learning curve here. This is where the biggest learning curve is, I think, is going to be, the budget sheet. The Excel spreadsheet was kind of a free for all, and you could put whatever you wanted in there. This is much more structured, and therefore there's going to be some learning to figure out how to get things that you want, that you used to just type in the budget Excel spreadsheet, into the format that InfoEd wants them to be in. So if I just give you like a quick overview to this, there's again a menu on the left, just like there's a menu for the proposal, just like there was a menu on the portal. The menus live on the left here. And when it lands you on the top bar here, this is a kind of an overview of your entire proposal or your entire budget. So right now, by default, it comes up with my 2 periods. So because that came from the create screen, it also put me as PI in here. So I know I'm already personnel. And then everything else is just blank. So we're going to go through and add more people. We're going to manipulate effort. We're going to do some non-personnel line items. And then that will be the end of the demonstration of the budget. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with putting effort on myself. So this is where I scroll and make sure that I have my notes handy. There we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up this little detail next to the PI line, next to my personnel line. And this is going to bring in some information. So what you see here is basically I am a 12-month employee, and I can tell that for a couple of different reasons. But one of them is because the calendar box is the only box that I can put information in. The base salary that's here came in from Banner. Obviously, we made this up because this is our demo PI mod person, but this salary did come in. We should come in for most employees correctly. It's coming from Banner. And then again, this is where I would put my effort and my person months. And when I say, okay, I as PI am going to put in like basically 10% effort. So maybe I'm going to put in 1.2 person months. And when I put that in, and then I just hit tab or click off of it, it says, oh, you must want to also put 1.2 person months on year 2 as well. So this is for year 1 and year 2. If you needed to change this one and you said, no, I'm only going to put 1 person month in on year 2, you can change that, obviously. But if I put it in here, it's going to just assume automatically that everything is going to stay the same across the span of the grant. And that's just a shortcut for you. Like, so you don't have to put 1.2 in every single year, but you can change it, obviously, if you need to. So at this point, I'm just going to hit save, because what that's going to do is it's going to take those and make some calculations based on my base salary and the fringe benefits rate that I have applied. So first, for I think it's 32% for faculty and staff. So that calculates all of that for me and says, okay, this is the amount that is going to be put on this proposal. So at this point, I want to point out a couple other little tabs here, just so that you know that they're here. Number 1, the appointment tab. This is the information that comes in from Banner. This is the other way you can tell that I'm a 12-month employee, because the appointment start and end dates are going to be the fiscal year appointment start and end dates. It also tells you that we're applying a standard 2% rate, inflation rate that gets applied at the time of the fiscal year change. So this will be inflating. So you'll see that's why the numbers look a little bit strange, because my year is not completely lined up with the fiscal year change. So it applies that 2% at the fiscal year change. And then this justifications tab is a place where you can type in the purpose of this person. What are they going to be doing? If you click autofill, it's just going to give you like, what will this person be responsible for? You don't have to use this. Most people are going to just upload a budget justification file. You can kind of see it. It's grayed out over here on this side on the main budget screen. You don't have to put a budget justification for every line item. But if you wanted to use that for notes for yourself, you absolutely are welcome to do so. The other tab that's on here is called cost sharing. And so we're not going to deep dive into cost sharing. We're not even going to surface dive into cost sharing, other than to point out that each line item has the ability to be cost shared. So you're going to do your cost sharing by line item, just like you currently do in the Excel spreadsheet. It just looks a little bit different. And in one of our budget, our more advanced budget trainings, we'll walk through how this works and why it works and what to do in more specific cases. But I just want to point out that cost sharing exists on each line item, and this is where you would do those manipulations. So at this point, I'm just going to save and done, because I'm done with my data entry for the PI record. So I'm going to go save and close. I am also going to add another person to this project. So down here is where we're going to add a new person. I'm going to start by typing in the personnel's name. So in this case, I handily have another profile called co-investigator. So this is Joe, co-investigator. He's just another person at the university. It comes up with his rocket number and UTAD, and department, sorry. I get to decide at this point, is this person key or non-key? So for most proposals, for proposals that didn't come from grants.gov, this is a meaningless distinction, honestly. It doesn't really matter whether you put them in as key or non-key, other than you want to make sure everyone is key who is responsible for the conduct or engaged in the research or reports on the research. So this is all the people that could have the ability to influence the research. So I'm going to say Joe co-investigator is a key person, and then I'm going to give him a co-investigator role. So I'm going to go ahead and add that person. And then I get a screen that looks very much like the screen we just saw for Demo PI. It has the same tabs across the top. But in this case, you can see that Joe co-investigator is actually a 9-month employee. So he makes $90,000 for his 9 months. So I'm going to go ahead and put him in for 1 summer month. So this will be 1 summer month of salary for Joe co-investigator on this. So I'm going to go save. I could save and see it and then save and close, or I can just click save and close at this point, because again, I'm not going to put anything in appointments, justifications, or cost sharing. I'm just going to hit that, and then it adds Joe co-investigator, and it gives me his numbers. So again, these are inclusive of fringe benefits, which is why they look higher than you might usually expect, because on the Excel spreadsheet, the fringe benefits have their own little section, and this one puts it all in together. So now we have 2 people on our proposal, and that's all I'm going to have on my project. So I'm going to leave that there for the time being. And then I'm going to go down here to the non-personnel group. So this is where we put things like travel and supplies and equipment and participant costs and tuition reimbursement and all even though those last 2 might seem like they're personnel costs, they're really non-personnel costs. So in this case, I am just going to go ahead and pick, I think the one I'm modeling it off of, this person was going to purchase a data set and use some survey tools from another consulting service. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick purchase services / consultants. And then I'm going to pick outside purchased services for this. So again, I'm buying a data set and I'm using a survey from another institution or another entity. So I pick that budget category. Then I pick from the list of object codes. Banner calls them account codes. So this is a little bit different. You haven't ever, researchers have never gone down this particular way of representing their expenses. But this, for those of you who have to do Concur, this should look vaguely familiar, because these are the same categories that Concur uses to categorize P-card expenses and invoices and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just click add item. And then I get another very similar screen. And so then I can, again, it has justifications, which I can write. It has the cost sharing if I need to do that. And in this case, I'm just going to say there were like $11,000 worth of supplies in both years. So I can put that. I can actually adjust the inflation here if I want to, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave that as $11,000 for both years. So again, save and close. And now I have a non-personnel line item. So again, travel would go here, supplies would go here, everything that you're familiar with that's non-personnel goes here, and including a few things that used to be kind of grouped with personnel, like grad student stipend or grad student tuition remission and things like that are going to end up in here in the non-personnel section. So I am going to pause again for a second here, and this is basically the summary screen, but you can do almost everything from the summary screen. So do we have any questions just this moment?
Jamie, did you address what to do if they try to add a personnel and can't?
I failed. Yes,
I
you're
didn't
right. That's an
think I
excellent
heard
point.
it, but I was also typing, so.
No, most excellent. You are correct. So this list, when I began typing for Joe Co-Investigator, is the list of all the people who are currently in InfoEd, but that is not the whole entirety of the university by any stretch of the imagination. So if you are trying to type someone and they don't exist in this list yet, it's because they probably don't have a profile in InfoEd yet. We are at the beginning of a new year with new grad students and new faculty and all sorts of new people that may have never been engaged with research before. So if you find that you can't find someone, please send an email to infoed@utoledo.edu, and that will and give us the first and last name. And if you have it handy, rocket number, UTED, and department are also extremely helpful for us to have. It's not necessary, but it would make our jobs a little bit easier and help us verify that we have the right John Smith. So, because we have many duplicate names. So if you can help us out with as much information about that person as possible, that would be great. If you can't, we totally understand. Please just send us an email and we will get that new profile set up as fast as we possibly can. So again, the email, I'm sure we will put it in the chat at some point, is infoed@utoledo.edu, and that is answered by our team. So you will be reaching a real person, I promise. Okay, so any other questions? Excellent. Okay, so I did mention when I put in Russell Sage as our foundation that this foundation does not allow us to collect F&A, but you will see that we have by default been collecting F&A on all the things that it would normally apply to. So we need to correct that. So this is one tiny little detour that we are going to take because it does happen a fair amount that the sponsor will limit F&A collection, especially in things like nonprofits. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the F&A screen. So I'm just going to click the F&A in the left menu, and that's going to actually give me down here a summary, a breakdown of how much F&A on each particular item that we have. So this is a really detailed view of the F&A, but for our purposes today, we're just going to have to make a little adjustment up here in the top. So in the top, you can see this is our target scheme. So that's what you chose back on the setup questions tab, where you said, okay, I'm a main campus person. This is organized research. I'm going to choose that rate. But because this sponsor doesn't allow it, I'm going to go over here to scheme and I'm going to say, oh no, I'm sorry, I have to collect 0 indirects on this. So 0% IDC. I'm going to go ahead and pick that. It automatically sets you here to say, oh, it's fixed by the sponsor that we can't have any indirects. And when I click apply, you'll see there's numbers in all of these F&As here. As soon as I click apply, these are going to go away. Did I click apply? There we go. So all the F&A now has disappeared off of this, but now we have a number that's called drift. And this tells us that if we were on a normal proposal, this is how much we would have gotten. And so this is our under recovery number. This is important for us to know how much F&A we're not collecting by choosing to propose to a sponsor like Russell Sage that doesn't allow indirects. So that's a really simple fix. We also have some other standard rates in here. A lot of times it's 10% that's fixed by the sponsor or 15% that's fixed by the sponsor. So we have the most common ones in here. If you can't find one, there is a manual option to put in a manual F&A, but I would highly recommend that at that point you talk to your grants coordinators about what this actually should be and make sure that all the numbers are lining up appropriately. So that's it for the F&A screen. Oh, you'll also notice that I got a little red flag here now that tells me that, oh, there's under recovery. That little red flag says there's drift because I was not able to collect my full indirects on this proposal. So there's a little flag that helps identify those proposals where this is where F&A is not the standard rate. Do we have any questions about that? Okay, So I'm just going to move down these a little bit quickly here. So the cost sharing, just like the F&A screen is a detailed account of the F&A, the cost sharing screen is a detailed account of the cost sharing. But of course, even on our 3 items, we didn't put any cost sharing in. So there's nothing super interesting on this screen right now. The next one is justification. So this is where you would upload your budget justification document. And then we also have versions and setup. So versions allows you to have multiple versions of this budget in order to like test out different combinations. And then setup is where you would change the PI or the budget periods. I see we have a hand up. Go ahead, Emily.
For the justifications portion, do
Yes.
they have to have a final version for this in order to keep going, or can it be skipped?
You can upload the justification document, like it doesn't have to be final. This is an interesting question. I almost want to defer to a grants coordinator on that, because what needs to be in here is something for the endorsement. So the whole point of having all of this done is so that a chair or a dean can sign off and say, yes, I understand what my commitments are and what resources I'm committing, what people I'm committing, et cetera. So for that purpose, does it need to be done? Maybe not, but for the the final version, yes, obviously it does need to be done. So
Okay.
I think it's a play it by ear sort of thing.
Okay.
And if I get a different answer from the grants coordinators, I'll tell you. I'll backtrack, because that's me making a supposition for the most part.
The question was whether it needs to be a final one to go through endorsement.
The question was, does it need to be final to complete the budget? So the answer is you have to have something to complete the budget in some cases, but like, could it be a picture of a cat? Yeah, it could. right.
Or just enough information for the endorsement, to say, I need a course release for XYZ or something.
Yes,
but yeah,
exactly.
sure. Just like the rest of the science stuff, people will have an option to, it's kind of expected that you might be editing that right up to the end because your request might change. Anyway,
correct.
That's how I'd answer it.
Thank you, Rick. Okay.
Sure.
So I'm going to return back to the budget main page here, because this is where it's not a checkbox on this page like it is everywhere else. It's a button. So I'm going to say, okay, at this point I am done. And because this is a foundation, I actually don't have to upload a justification, but on grants.gov opportunities and some spin opportunities, it is required to have a budget justification document there before you can complete the budget. So I'm going to go ahead and just complete this. And now you can see I'm in view mode. So before I was in green edit mode, now I'm in yellow view mode, and all of this stuff is kind of locked down. And again, if I need to make a change, I can uncomplete the budget at any time and make changes and then recomplete it. And it'll tell me that it's going to push the existing data when I recomplete it. So I have completed my budget. And so then I want to highlight up here these little done and save buttons. So obviously, because I completed it, that did save it. I don't need to resave it again. But it's very important that we all get used to using the done button, because the done button is what tells the system that you are done in this record, and therefore it is open for editing to other people. So we're inside the budget. We're actually inside the proposal, inside the budget. So this done button doesn't matter as much, but I want to highlight it here because it's a good habit to get into, to use this done button to close the record. As the system is so collaborative that if you just use the little X up here to leave, that record is locked for an hour. So if someone else needed to get in and make a change, or your grants coordinator was trying to help you with something, if you use the X, they are going to get a little frustrated because they won't be able to get into the record. So always use the done button. There is a way that they can manually log people out of records, but obviously it's just easier if everybody just uses the done button. So you'll notice when I completed the budget and I clicked the done button, it put a little check mark right here next to the budget. So that's all very happy, well and good. I'm going to move on to the personnel tab next. And the personnel tab is just basically a list of the personnel on the project. And I had already added Joe and co-investigator to the budget. So by default, they end up also on the personnel tab. I can add additional people here, but I'm not going to today. A couple of features of this tab that I want to point out. Number one, CV bio sketch for something like this Russell Sage one. Obviously that is not required, but certain other federal opportunities and spin opportunities will require that you have the CV and bio sketch uploaded here. So this is just a little file upload thing, just like every other thing. So I'm going to close that. Additionally, there's a little bit more information here. And so this little COI column here tells you if the person that's been added has a completed COI. So meaning not whether they've, it tells you that they've got one, not that it has something. So I'm sorry, I'm speaking really badly about this today. When you see this little yellow triangle and you hover over it, you can see that this says EFI disclosed. That means that that person did their disclosure, it is current, and they have something on it to look at. You as a researcher or a department head or a department chair don't see the details, you just see that something has been disclosed for this person. If they had not yet done their disclosure in InfoEd, that's going to be a red question mark. And if they did their disclosure but had no EFI on their disclosure, it's going to be a green check mark. So those little icons kind of help you at a glance to know what is the state of any of the people that you added to your project. So you can get a little bit of a head start because COI is one of those things that needs to be done at different times. But for the most part, the rule is you need to have the COI done at time of award, and it needs to be any EFI need to be managed at time of award. So we don't release the funds until COIs are done and any relationships have been managed if that's appropriate. So you can get a head start if you can get everybody on your proposal to have done their disclosure in InfoEd, then at least the first part of tracking everybody down and making them do it is taken care of. So that's a little clue up front as to what the state of the people on the project is, and to give you a little heads up to begin with. So in this case, both of my investigators here have disclosed some sort of an EFI, and it will be up to our grants coordinators at the end, like when they need to send that off for review and make sure that anything is managed or not. So on my personnel page here, again, I mentioned you can add additional people. It's much like adding them to the budget, but for today, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to click the little completed box, and that is going to, again, turn this into a view mode and just keep that group listed here. So now I've got 2 checkboxes. And this is the point at which we would ask that you return to the intake endorsement form. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to pause for a second. Does anybody have anything else they want to ask about budget or personnel? Okay. All right. So I should have previously filled out the resource engagement or the research attributes, but I didn't. So we're going to skip those anyway. Then you'll see here in the personnel section that now I have the 2 people in here. And so the personnel section here is where we are going to add our shared credit. So we make some notes here to remind everyone that shared credit no longer determines F&A distribution. So a long time ago, they used to mean basically the same thing. Shared credit equaled F&A distribution. We're not doing that anymore. Shared credit can still be apportioned in increments of 1%. So anybody on the protocol or anybody on the proposal, I'm sorry, could get shared credit depending on how it wants to, how the PI wants to distribute it. And so we do that just by clicking the little add button here. And then we say, okay, who do I want to give the shared credit to? Well, the first person I want to give it to is myself. So I'm going to go ahead and select PI demo. And I can give myself 100% credit here, but I'm feeling generous today. So I'm going to just take 90% and give the other 10% to Joe. So I'm going to go ahead and click add again in order to add Joe. So I select him and I say 10%. It is unfortunately up to you to make sure that these numbers equal 100%, but your grants coordinators will be checking your math as we go along. So that is the shared credit portion of things. And again, we use this in reports and in Faculty 180, but it is no longer going to determine the F&A distribution. That's going to be determined down here. So If you remember before, we had a screen where it was just zeros all across the board. And now we can see we have our direct costs that came in from our budget. But sadly for this one, there are no indirect costs. So does this really matter? No, it doesn't, but we still have to fill it in. So both Joe and I happen to be from the same department. So I'm going to go ahead and click this. I'm going to say test MC department. And I'm going to select it. And I'm going to give that department 100% a 0. So that first one is obviously required, but beyond that, we've set up some new rules for F&A distribution. And again, this might seem a little bit painful at first, but it is to the benefit of all, because this is where we're really going to see the improvement on once it's awarded, how long does it take to get set up? This is going to really reduce the number of combinations that are possible and thus the setup time. So these little drop-down boxes are all just potential percentages for up to 4 departments. So we have basically said our rule is 10% increments, except we are allowing for up to 2 departments to be at 5%. And we are requesting that you order things from highest to lowest percentages. So if I did have multiple departments, I could say, okay, this one, the first, maybe I have 2, I could put 95 and 5. Or if I had 3, I could put 95 and 5, or I could do any combination. Basically, any combination of this drop down that you can put together that equals 100%. And again, you have to do the math. Your grants coordinators are going to check it. That will be a valid combination. So it is a limited set, but it's pretty flexible in terms of what you can do with it. There are some things you can't do. You can't do 85 and 15, for example, but you can do 80-20 or 90-10. And so that's going to be sufficient to keep our combinations to a very set number that will, again, streamline processes further down the road. So I also want to point out that we did make accommodation for equal splits across 3 departments. So obviously equal splits across 2 is easy. Equal splits across 3 looks like 33, 34, 33, 33. Equal splits across 4 equals 25 across the board. So we do have those options in here to do equal splits, in addition to having the mostly 10% rule and the possibly 5% rule. So we've done our best to accommodate the most common combinations, and we've also made some accommodations for specific situations. And that's this limited list is going to be our list moving forward. So I'm going to pause for a second and allow for any questions. Do we have questions about shared credit or F&A distribution?
I think we should point out for today's attendees that this is a significant change in the application of policy. So if they're working with various researchers, they may need to dive into a little deeper explanation of what's going on with the shared credit and F&A.
Yes, that's true. We did change the policy a while back, but it has not been reflected on our RSP 100 form. It will be shortly because this is a staggered.
The new one is out.
It is now?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Yes,
it is reflected now. So the RSP 100 form has been changed to look a little bit more like this to emphasize that split between the F&A distribution and the shared credit. And so, yeah, it might take a little bit more explaining because those two ideas have been intertwined for quite some time, but the policy to separate them has been in place for quite some time. We just haven't had the documentation to really indicate that that's how it should be. So here we are. All right, so I'm gonna, I can't complete this because I didn't fill out all of these questions, and I'm not gonna do that now because it just takes up too much time. So I'm just gonna move on to the attachments and routing screen.
Jamie, can I interrupt for a moment because I think you might want to address this if you didn't.
Yeah.
Correct me if I missed it. It's back on the budget and back on the personnel, but it relates to committed effort. Oh,
yep, that's true. I failed to say that in a very clear way, so I will say it now. Okay, so when you're putting effort in on a person. We are asking that, or not asking, but the system requires that you only put in committed effort. So that committed effort could be all charged to the sponsor. That committed effort could be cost shared between the sponsor or the institution, or one or the other, obviously, or just cost shared just with the institution. Or it could be voluntary committed. So again, the sponsor didn't require it, but we're putting it on there because we think it makes a stronger case. But no uncommitted effort is going to be recorded in InfoEd. So this is all committed effort. So it has to be basically it has to be accounted for. You have to be able to, we're going to have effort certification is going to be tied to this. All of the pieces are committed effort now. Probably didn't do a great job of that, but thank you for reminding me, Stacy. I'm sorry, I have to back up to say that, but all right. So I'm going to go ahead and again, click done on here, and I'm going to go to the attachments and routing. So here is where you could add any supporting documents or application materials for this particular opportunity. Again, because this is a nonprofit that has their own portal, they have their own requirements. So they might require different supporting documents, and you could upload them all in here. So this could be a repository for all the documents for this proposal. You don't have to, it's not a requirement, but it is probably helpful if you were able to do that. You'll see it already has like a little view of the proposal intake endorsement form, but any other documents you want to support here. And then the next thing we would do at this point, if we had a check mark next to the setup questions and intake endorsement and budget and personnel, this is the point at which it's complete enough for endorsement. So the RSP 100 form that gets kind of turned in at any time is really something that should have been endorsed prior to submission. And so we are using InfoEd to collect that endorsement, and we can do that as soon as we have check marks next to all of these. So and how you will do that is you will select, it actually only has one option. It's already selected, this external funding endorsement route. And when I click submit here, it's going to do two things. The first thing it's going to do, because I am the PI on this project, is it's going to give me my certification text. So this is all the stuff that you would have signed off on the RSP 100 form, indicating you are accurate, you're truthful, you agree to disclose, you agree that this is, correct and complete to the best of your knowledge, that kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and click accept here. Don't decline it. If you decline it, it doesn't go anywhere. Obviously, it doesn't move forward. So this is your acknowledgement of all of those assertions. So I'm going to click continue. Then the second thing that this does, it takes a second, and this is why I like Chrome, because you get the little spinny wheel up in the corner. It's pretty small, I get it, but it does tell you that it's thinking. And right now what it's thinking about is figuring out who has to sign off on this. So this is when we said routing is automatic. You initiate it as a PI or as a department head, or even as a grants coordinator. You could also initiate this, but it is automatic in that it knows, because demo PI is on this and Joe co-investigator is on this, it knows who their chair and dean is, and therefore it calculates who has to sign this proposal. So I'm going to kind of read you through this. I'm not actually going to submit it to route because I shouldn't, because I don't have the intake endorsement form complete yet. But I am going to read you, like, it calculates this to let you kind of know what's the path this thing is going to take. So the first thing that's going to happen is the PI is going to get a submission receipt email that just says, hey, you did this, it's done, or it's on its way, right? So you get an immediate confirmation as the PI that your proposal is in endorsement. It's on its way. The next thing that happens is it goes to your grants coordinator, and your grants coordinator does a check to make sure that you have followed the rules. You have a completed budget, you have a completed personnel list, you have answered the questions on the intake endorsement form appropriate to the opportunity that you've chosen. And they look for, things, they look to make sure you've designated your cost share appropriately, et cetera. So once the grants coordinator has determined that this is in shape to be endorsed by leadership, they will approve it. And then the PI will get an email that says, hey, it's passed the GC endorsement check. So it's on its way to your fellow co-investigators. And so then it goes through all of the co-investigators. So in this case, I only had the one, that's Mr. Joe co-investigator. So Mr. Joe co-investigator will get an email that says, hey, Mr. Joe, you have been added to a proposal that requires your endorsement. And they will do the very same thing that I did as PI. They will get a certification text that they have to agree to that looks exactly like the one the PI got. And then they will approve it. And then it will move on. And again, the PI will get an email that says, oh, all your key personnel have now endorsed the project. Next, it's going to go on to the leadership, the chairs and the deans. So one of the kind of cool things about InfoEd is that you can do both of these steps, the investigator and the chair and dean endorsement steps, are now parallel processes instead of serial processes. So if I had 5 co-investigators on here, with the RSP 100 form, I would have had to run around to each of those 5 people and have them each sign it, because I'll need one copy that has everybody's signature on it. And so if I had to do that, and then I had to go collect from another 2 or 3 chairs and deans, basically there's a lot of what we might call sneaker net going around, even though some of it's probably email and you have to print and then sign and then scan and then send it on. We get to avoid all of that. And what happens is that at this particular point for this example, the dean and the chair, the chair of my test department and the dean of the test college that it belongs to are both going to get the same notification. Hey, there's a proposal, it needs your endorsement. And they can both sign. It doesn't matter what order it goes in. So if dean is used to waiting for the chair, they can still wait for the chair to sign first. But they could also just sign right away. And if there were more than one chair and dean involved, you would see all of their names here. And again, they all get the same notification all at the same time. So everybody can see everybody who has to sign off and if they have or not. So that is kind of a benefit, I think, because we are cutting back, hopefully, the time it takes to run something around and get all the appropriate signatures. So once chair and deans have signed, then again, the PI gets a notification that says your leadership is done. It's back in the hands of your grants coordinator, and they do one final check. And what they're looking for at this point is, did anybody approve this with some suggested modifications? Because if there have been suggested modifications, then we need to figure out, does the grants coordinator needs to figure out, does this have to be routed for approval again once those changes are made, or are they minimal enough that it can go through as it currently stands? So they will be in charge of making that decision. Is there enough time left to go through endorsement again? Is it worth going through endorsement again? They get to make that decision at this point. And then when they say, nope, this is fine, we're going to make the changes post endorsement, no big deal, or just little things, then again, the PI will get a notification that the route is complete. And if at any time anybody here says, I can't agree to this, then there's another path that it takes. It goes down a disapproval path, and it can get resubmitted, and changes can be made, and it can get resubmitted, et cetera. But this path does have to have everybody on it saying approve or approve with modifications in order to make it past the whole route. So like I said, I'm not going to actually submit this. We do have another training about how to endorse something. So Stacy will touch on that when we get back to our slides. But for the time being, this is what would happen next, is that this thing would go through its endorsement process. So I'm going to stop here, ask for additional questions.
Yeah, I have a question. How many times are people notified that they have something that needs to be signed off on?
That's a great question. Right now, just once. We do have the opportunity to set up reminders. I'm going to have to look into how those work. We haven't gotten that far quite yet, but right now it is just an initial notification.
Okay.
Are you thinking that more might be needed, Emily?
I'm just thinking of my own experience with RSP forms and getting people to sign them. A lot of the time it requires multiple reminders, especially when it comes down to the chair position. I would say a lot of the time for other departments, it tends to sit for a little bit and wait. and even for other PIs, it tends to sit sometimes and wait. So I find myself sending reminder emails. So I
Mhm.
just don't want things to get sent once and then they kind of disregard it and then we're sitting there waiting. So that was just my question. I didn't know if it was, we were able to like kind of determine how many times or like what the process was.
Yeah.
There is
I-
a
well-
way for the PI and other folks associated with the proposal record to see where it is in the
Okay.
route. So it may be a little bit more of a, we see that it's still there and we kind of need to nudge an appropriate person to do their piece of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say that. So once this is submitted, this screen changes a little bit and you get like the list down here in this big white space will be the list of all the people who have to sign and who's signed, what their determination was, if they had any comments that were appropriate to the person who's logged in. It would have all of those things in this space. So you can clearly see when they were notified that they were supposed to approve it and if they have or not approved it. So that is going to be transparent to everyone who is in the route. And so right now I'm going to recommend that, yes, as a department person who keeps a handle on these things, it probably will be easier for you to keep a handle on it, but it's still going to be a somewhat manual process in terms of reminding people. However, I will ask Stacy to take a note because I know there is some functionality in here about sending repeating warnings, and we have not done a bunch of digging in on that yet. So that is functionality that we should explore and make sure that we take advantage of if it's appropriate.
I want to point out that this is the paper ones, Emily, that you might have been accustomed to people having sitting around. That was different. And we're going to have to make sure we get the message across that now endorsement is actually, we're enforcing the rules that have always been the policy of University of Toledo forever, but we're actually enforcing them, saying, no, it has to be endorsed prior to submission. So we need chairs to recognize this is a required step for grants to advance, and it's a deadline. It involves deadlines, and this isn't just, oh well, I'll get around to it later because it's already been submitted, and it can sit around 2 weeks more. No, not anymore.
Oh, okay. So the deadlines that we have now for like 10 days and 15 days, those are going to be enforced then.
Well, it's going to, no, yes, those are going to be enforced. But what I'm really saying is with that 10 or 15 days is required because this endorsement has to be completed prior to submission.
Okay.
That's the big difference, right? Before, people have not necessarily committed a signature on a piece of paper or something until after it's submitted, which is of course kind of meaningless.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay.
But so if they're in that mindset of like, oh, well, we can get around to that when we get around. No, this now means the person's grant is stuck, can't be edited until they do their part. This now becomes a real important department chair duty.
Okay. All right. That's going to be, all right. That's going to be a big one. All right.
Yep.
Okay.
I was just thinking that, Emily, I'm like, this is going to be a big culture shift at all levels of stakeholder because things were just done a little differently for a very long time. So we really want chairs and deans to get in the habit of reviewing within a couple of days so that the proposal can continue on to anyone else who may need to see it, including coming back to the grants coordinators in our office so that they can do a final check and make any adjustments needed at that point.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot. That's gonna be a, okay. Okay.
All right. So with that, I'm going to move on unless there are other questions. All right. Okay. So at this point, it's off on its little endorsement path. And for this particular example, it would go off onto that path. It would go through the endorsement process and then it would come back and it would be available again. We could add some more supporting documents if there's some sciencey bits left to add at that point. And then the finalized tab is actually where the whole application package gets put together. And so I'm not going to demonstrate that today, but I am going to say that this is where things, where the final package gets assembled. And then if this was grants.gov, this is also the page where it would be submitted system to system. But again, this is just a nonprofit that has its own portal. So none of this applies. This is just a collection area for this particular proposal. So that is the end of my demonstration portion. It is 10:41, so we have 20 minutes left, and I'm happy to entertain additional questions if we have them. All right, then I'm going to use good manners here, good habits, and click the done button. And then again, I can look at the locate my records and I can see there it is. I can reopen it from here by just clicking on the proposal and clicking proposal development and clicking edit. And then this is the same thing again with all the same areas. So that's how I would find it again and how I would get back into it. And with that, I will turn it back over to Stacy.
Awesome. So we've got just a couple of finishing slides that we want to display for everyone. Again, those in attendance today may already be aware of this information, but we want to make sure. Oops, I passed my own slide. So some upcoming trainings that will be happening in the end of the month, like that last full week of October. These are new dates we've just added. We'll be getting them up on the website as soon as we can. But we've got another training set up for anyone who needs to endorse. So previously, anyone who would have signed an RSP 100, this training is appropriate for them. So for example, Emily, if you have folks that you are supporting in your role who will need to do the endorsement process, please feel free to promote this training to them. We will also touch on how folks can set up a delegate if necessary and appropriate for the role that they are in. Then the next day on October 25th, we have another training on submitting your COI disclosures. So if you have folks in your department who still need to do that, who are maybe on active research right now, that would be especially important that they get that done quickly. We want to have everyone in with their current COI completed by November 1st, if at all possible. And then we have another one of these proposal budget orientation trainings at the very end of the month. And as mentioned, we are in development of some more deeper dive type trainings for budget and hopefully some workshop opportunities later in the fall and winter when PIs and, associated folks can come work specifically on their projects with some hands-on help. I will point out that anyone who is interested in doing an NSF submission, we are doing a targeted training in person in November on that topic. So please encourage any of the folks you're interacting with to take advantage of these. We'll have the new dates up on our website very quickly. And then we can always be reached by our email infoed@utoledo.edu, and our FAQ and explainer page is always a good source to check for help guides and trainings that have been recorded already. And with that, we are finished with the formal presentation.
And I'll stop the recording now.
Thank you. I've still got 15 minutes on my calendar for anybody who